A healthy Venus in your consciousness is going to exhibit the traits of Venus in Pisces, where Venus is exalted. So Pisces is the zodiac sign or the energetic environment where the Venus agenda or the Venus force of human nature, it's the most compatible there. So this doesn't mean that if you have Venus in Pisces that Venus is automatically perfect and thriving in your life, but there's a much stronger tendency, especially in the first 30 to 40 years of your life. So Venus can be in any zodiac sign, but when it's healthy and doing well, it's going to be exhibiting some of the characteristics of Venus in Pisces. So we learned in the first video that Venus is the force within us that creates win-win situations in our material lives. So we have Venus within us evaluating whether what we are investing ourselves in is worth it to do, and whether what we're investing we're receiving equal or more in return. And the most important evaluation that we do in our life is evaluating other people. So Venus is therefore the planet that rules over relationships. And we also learned in the first video that it's an erroneous notion to say that Venus is the planet of love. Love is a far more complex sensation and concept than what Venus is doing, actually. So the reason is that love, the way it's commonly thought of, it's this very personal emotion that results from feeling connected to something greater than us. So it's actually the sun, moon, and Jupiter that give us these sensations of being connected to something greater than us. And these are the sattvic planets. So the planets that give us this, their motivation is to do things that make us feel good, to find things that we can do in life that are purely from the inspiration to do them, that it's who we are and that's why we do them. So the sattvic planets, that's what their job is to do, to find those things that connect with who we are on a deep personal level. And so what that does is it generates that feeling of what we call love. And we're going to explore a lot more in the next video about this idea of Venus and love when we talk about Venus's enemies, the sun and especially the moon. So we're going to really dive into the next video. But to say right here, I want to just get this idea out of people's head because it's the first word that people generally use with Venus. It's the planet of love. What the sun, moon, and Jupiter do, the planets that actually generate that feeling of what we call love, love is a far more profound and meaningful feeling than what we get in a romantic relationship. So basically, Venus is a far more practical planet when it's operating healthy. So any good relationship, it's going to pass that phase of that excitement phase. And what a good relationship is it's grounded and realistic about what each person is expected to be giving and receive in the relationship. It's an exchange, and it has to be extremely practical. So an unhealthy Venus is going to jump into situations because they feel this emotion, and it feels intense and it feels good because they're receiving attention from someone that they're attracted to. But there's a lack of a long-term foundation that they're building, and a commitment, and the practicalities aren't there. The give and take aren't there. That's an unhealthy Venus. So the first thing first, we have to stop thinking about Venus as the planet of love. The love that Venus will give is a very simplistic, temporary love that it feels good to do something with another person who is our partner. And it's kind of the romantic comedy version of love, of what people associate with Venus. So it's a really key idea to take away, is that the love that we get from a relationship, where that love actually comes from us feeling a deeper purpose, Jupiter, our sun feeling that we're connected to our soul's path, and our moon feeling that we're connected to a greater plan in life, that our personal self, our individual self, is connected to something bigger. Venus is really, the healthy Venus is all about the doing things in the material world that enable our lives to become more enjoyable. And a positive and a long-term relationship is something that really boosts our ability to live an enjoyable life. So now let's dive into more of that idea and what the healthy qualities of Venus are. So probably the greatest potential skill, the most valuable power that you can train your Venus to have is the skill of accurately reading people beneath the surface of what they're saying and getting to the heart of their intentions and discovering what that person is all about. So we all are basically doing this subconsciously as we read people's body language throughout the day. We're seeing what they're really feeling when they're not expressing it explicitly. But the exalted Venus consciousness, an excellent Venus, a healthy Venus, is able to accurately read into body language and what people aren't saying, and also read beneath what they are saying, doing that very conscientiously and very consciously. You have conscious thoughts about what the person is actually about. And so a healthy Venus is extremely attuned to the subtle messages that other people are constantly giving off. And they are reading in between the words, and they're hearing what the person is actually saying. So it's very hard to trick a person with Venus in Pisces, or it's very hard when a Venus is healthy. They're not going to be very naive, a naive kind of person. They're able to see what the person is actually intending. They don't get swept away by a person's charm or external appearance. They can appreciate those things, but they're reading below the surface of what the other person is saying on the surface. So it's interesting when you think about, why would Piscean energy, if Venus is exalted in Pisces is a very idealistic sign. Why would Venus in Pisces and healthy Venus not be naive if Pisces is all about idealism? And that's because it's ruled by Jupiter, the planet of optimism, and the planet of shooting for an ideal, shooting for the best possible outcome, and seeing the bigger picture, and shooting for a vision for your life that would make it the most prosperous and abundant. So when we think about it a little deeper, why is Venus not a naive planet when it's healthy? And if Pisces is such an idealistic place, why is Venus not so naive in Pisces? Pisces is location. Its symbolic location and literal location on the earth is the ocean. And there's so much fascinating symbolism about the ocean. But essentially, the ocean is where all life begins and where all life ends. And it represents the mixing of all experiences into this cohesive whole. So the ocean is the metaphorical place where all things good and bad, and you could say literal place, where all things good and bad are understood to be within one complete construct. So we always learn that there's 7 oceans. No, there's only one ocean, or I think it's 5. There's only one, and it's all interconnected. And symbolically, it means the totality of all the possible experiences on Earth. So Venus, the planet of reading and evaluating other people, it's able to see that nobody is either purely good or purely bad, and that everyone has positive and negative traits to them. So very realistic look that, just like the ocean, there are harmful creatures in the ocean. There are creatures that are not carnivorous creatures in the ocean. The ocean can become polluted or impure in other places. The deep parts of the ocean is extremely pure. You have the coral reefs. You have all of these, and then you have the deep, dark ocean where the water pressure is so heavy that no one can go there. Only certain creatures can live there, and it's just pure dark. So you have so much variety within in the ocean, but none of it's either good or bad. Some of it, depending on the creature, some of it is a desirable place to be or an undesirable place to be. So on the one hand, the healthy Venus is very non-judgmental about others. It just sees different varieties of experiences within other people. And at the same time, it knows not to allow another person into their life that may be toxic or may not be optimal for their generating a positive life. But it's going to accept another person for who they are. But it's going to be judgmental in a way, but also non-judgmental, in the sense that they realize that person might not be good for me, but that person can be good for someone else. So it comes back to this excellent skill of a healthy Venus, is to be extremely realistic and comprehensive in the understanding about human nature in general and other human beings. So choosing to see the good parts of another person and not ignoring the troublesome sides, but accepting there's say negativity in other people. They can see both, but choosing to appreciate the good parts of them, but also acknowledging that there can be problematic parts of other people. So a good Venus is able to focus on that positive and able to see the latent potential in other persons that other people may not be able to perceive in themselves. So there is a sense of kind of optimism about a healthy Venus, and not just focusing on the negative. And I touched on this in the previous video, but being able to expand the positive parts of a person while not ignoring the negative. So when it comes to romantic relationships, Venus in Pisces and a healthy Venus in general, developed Venus that has a high degree of understanding of this force within us, they're very selective about their partners, and they know that not everyone is a potential mate to them. So a great Venus, it has to feel a deep connection with another person in order to consider them as someone worth investing in and sharing their life force with them. So they want to be able to explore the deeper aspects of their consciousness with a potential partner, and say a potential mate, or even just someone that you want to do business with, someone that you want to collaborate with on a deeper level. You're going to have to really get to know that person if you're going to be investing yourself within them. And so a healthy Venus will want to get at what the person's true philosophy is about life. Get into their inner psychology, what makes them tick, what are their virtues and what are their vices. And when a person is, when you're looking for a potential mate, a healthy Venus will want to see, does that person have a bigger picture view? Do they see the majestic sides and the beauty of nature? And are they able to entertain otherworldly topics, or topics that don't say pertain to the issue at hand? Can they go into other levels of understanding? So not every great Venus is going to be completely fascinated about the occult and these kinds of subjects and the metaphysics. You don't have to be a philosopher. You can have a great Venus and not be the philosopher type. But when they're meeting somebody and they could be potentially spending a lot of time with that person, or spending a lot of money with that person in a business deal, because Venus is the planet of doing good business, it's a priority to learn as much about them as possible. And so finding out what their deep desires are, what are their fantasies, what are their dreams, what are their aspirations, getting to those deeper layers on who that person is, what's driving them as an individual, and then also probing into their spiritual side and seeing the bigger perspectives on life. So Venus in Pisces and a healthy Venus is always trying to get at deeper parts of other people that they're interacting with. So I find that an excellent skill of the diplomat Venus. Venus is the diplomat. What they're developing through life is a high level of knowledge about how the world really works. So I like to use that phrase because, again, it shows that there's not an illusion attached to when people look at the world around them. And an unhealthy Pisces in general will create these illusions. They'll have fantasies that they get lost in. And because Pisces is such this expansive place, it's the sign of liberating oneself from material concerns. So there's a risk for an unhealthy Pisces in general, it doesn't matter if Venus is there, to indulge in fantasy. But when Venus is there, remember that Venus is a Rajasic planet, and Rajasic meaning that, along with Mercury, it's their agenda within us to improve our factual, concrete, material lives, and to make good choices and decisions that are going to make our lives better and more pleasurable and enjoyable. So it's a practical planet. And so Venus is also a Brahmin planet, along with Jupiter. So it means that it's involving ourselves and educating ourselves about the world around us. And in Venus's case, educating ourselves about the practical world, always learning and growing in knowledge. So Venus, as it comes down to, is the student of the world. And a highly functioning Venus is excellent at understanding politics, world affairs, current events, because all of these kinds of activities in the world it's about the constant negotiations for influence and power. And a good Venus will have, they're not going to be, they won't be a, what do you call it, a news junkie or someone like that. But someone that, like I said, wants to see how the world really works and has a realistic understanding about how politics works, because all that is human relationships in constant flux. And they're going to have a very reasonable and thoughtful understanding about how world affairs work, because again, it's all about the negotiations of the wants and desires between people. So a true mastery of Venus would be a person who's able to comprehend the complexities of human desires for gaining influence. Not that this person will desire influence, that depends on a lot of factors in the chart, but they understand why people are gaining influence and how they gain influence. And while they're being able to relate that to deeper spiritual principles, so they're seeing why people are motivated to do certain things, and then they can relate that to deeper ideas about spirituality. So what does it mean, the desire for power? And the desire for power comes for a deeper yearning within a person to find meaning for their life, and that the surface intention of gaining power is just a way for them to, say, mask or to satisfy this subconscious desire, this spiritual desire for purpose, giving purpose to their meaningful existence. So people who have a good Venus, they can see into a person's, they can intuit and see into people's inner psychology and then relate that to something deeper within them and why they're exhibiting a certain behavior and what that behavior can be rooted in. So they're able to connect spiritual ideas with that kind of practical understanding about how the world works. So a healthy Venus is very, very intuitive, not just about other people, but they're able to access the limitless and infinite world within themselves. So Venus is one of the planets that Jaimini says, that Jaimini, the Vedic astrologer, the ancient Vedic astrologer, he says that it makes a person a better writer, specifically with poetry. So Venus is this planet of physical grace and giving this kind of elegance to one's physicality and movements. But the mental form of grace and that physical eloquence and being able to carry oneself very smoothly and charismatically, you could kind of say, just having that kind of dexterity. The mental form of that is being able to express oneself eloquently, simply, and using metaphors. And so metaphors are being able to see underlying patterns between two dissimilar things and to use words in an extremely artistic and symmetrical way. So that's what poetry is. So this intuitive strength of a healthy Venus naturally makes them very connected to their inner spiritual impulses and the non-physical world. And so when you add that skill of being able to see deeper meaning in something that is to the superficial thought form of something, or something superficial, seeing the deeper meaning in it, what you get is the skill of writing fiction and storytelling. So this kind of healthy Venus is able to be, these people tend to have this lifelong interest in mythology of the past and the present cultures, of anthropology, and how people of the past, how their societies worked, how the world worked in past cultures, and also an interest in the stories and the tales that have been passed down through generations. Because what these old stories that stick with us, they are explaining archetypes of human nature that are essentially universal. And I mentioned in the past video that one of the intelligences of Venus is called kavya, and that's a Sanskrit word that means to be able to see hidden or buried meaning in something. So the very strong and healthy Venus has this propensity to be attracted to aspects of life that have deep meaning, and that means the mystical side of life, of astrology, and being able to interpret the subtle energies around us, of course, tarot reading. And as I was saying, they're seeing this underlying pattern between past and present and of cultures, of how human beings haven't really changed that much over the period of time. We all still embody these basic archetypes and these basic behaviors, and there is a unity to that. And then those archetypes are shared in fictitious stories. And in fiction, you can explain a truth about the deeper aspects of human nature in a false story. So Venus has all of these abilities, and what it kind of leads to is this attraction to the study of human beings throughout history, and of course, like I said, mythology and symbolic representations of human understanding and human knowledge. So the planets that rule, we have these 5 basic senses, and the planets that rule them: Mars rules sight, Mercury rules smell, Jupiter rules hearing, Saturn rules touch, and Venus rules taste. So a healthy Venus, and you can say Venus in Pisces especially, and any person that's developing a healthy Venus, something to focus on. It doesn't want to just learn about these profound things that I'm talking about mythology and about deeper philosophies, how human beings have operated over long periods of time. But a healthy Venus wants to taste them, meaning that they want to have direct experiences relating to this knowledge that they're gathering. So it's an interesting thing to think about, because we learn that Venus's best friend, Mercury, it's debilitated in the sign that Venus is exalted in, and vice versa. Venus is debilitated in the sign that Mercury is exalted in. So that is a very, it's a very interesting happening that works in astrology. But these 2 planets are mutual friends to one another. So let's just think about, why would Mercury be debilitated in this sign that Venus is great in? Well, Mercury is just smelling, so it rules smell. It's just smelling the profound nature of things. It's holding itself back from actually, it's like if you go to and you're smelling food, you smell it to test the food. And then if you want that food, wow, that smells good, I'm going to eat the food, actually ingest it. Mercury's staying at that smelling stage, you could kind of say, when it comes to Piscean experiences. So Mercury in Pisces, what it translates to is they're way too theoretical, and they'll talk about these big things that they believe they understand about philosophy and spirituality, but they're not engaging with direct experiences of them. So they don't truly understand the philosophies that they're talking about, because they haven't lived them directly. They haven't tasted them in the same way that Venus seeks to taste these spiritual concepts by practicing profound spiritual techniques, or to be able to desire to really live out and to go test out their deeper philosophy in the world, to really see if their philosophy works in the world. So the strong Venus and the healthy Venus wants to engage with the world directly to see if their ideas actually play out, and to be able to adjust their ideas and make decisions upon their direct experience. So again, this comes back to Venus being such a practical planet. It's not so lost in theory. It wants to be able to see if what they really believe is true, and to learn, how does the world really work, because I figured that out, not because someone told me or I read it in a book. My decisions led to this, and that made me realize that this concept needed to be adjusted. So Venus really wants to get into the world and to swim in the world of ideas, and to really test those ideas out in the practical world. So again, Venus is a very practical, where Mercury, it's too cerebral, and they're too ungrounded when it comes to the bigger ideas in life. It's not really truly experiencing them the way that a healthy Venus will. So something that I haven't mentioned yet is an important function of Venus. So this function is to decide on things, to choose something, to commit to a path in life. Venus is the planet that makes that decision and then goes with it. So we have this sequence of the planets. The 4th planet, we have Mercury. Mercury is gathering information and, say, experimenting with options, and it's basically the information gathering planet. The 5th planet, Jupiter, is juxtaposing the possible choices in the context of what is the moral choice, the planet of morality. How can we look at the possibilities from a higher perspective, and what would be good for me and what would be bad for me, and do they align with my higher philosophy of how I should live my life? Then we have the sixth planet, which is the decision making itself, which is Venus. So Venus is this force within us that makes a choice and then commits to that choice of dedicating oneself to something. So a healthy Venus is excellent at evaluating and then making that choice. And that choice is healthy for me, or it's going to lead me to an improved life. And that can be on the small scales, just choosing what food to eat during the day. And then just enlarging that, making the big choices in life. Venus is the planet of marriage, and a huge decision we have to make based on our evaluation. But the decision itself is, who do we marry? Who do we commit ourselves to? What are we going to be devoting ourselves to in our life? And that could be, what is it, our career? You could really expand it on basically everything. Venus is the most important planet in the Navamsha chart, the marriage chart, because the Navamsha chart shows us what path we're committing to in our life. Are we committing to a spiritual path? Are we committing to an educational path? Are we committing to marriage? A healthy Venus in the Navamsha has this ability to devote oneself to that path full-fledgedly, and to commit oneself mentally, physically, and spiritually to a specific thing, whether that's a person or whether it's, like I said, a certain a career, or whether it's a spiritual path that a person goes down. So it's a no small thing at all, this aspect of Venus, this decision, what we're devoting ourselves to. It's the planet of devotion. And we live in this world of unlimited choices, and it can easily corrupt Venus, because it's called being a slave to all the choices. We have all these different possibilities constantly around us. In traditional times, there were less choices. So when you made a choice, you committed yourself to it, because other options weren't going to really come along. Nowadays, other options are always coming along in a variety of things. We're surrounded by more people, and the modern culture encourages people to kind of test something out and not fully commit to it. But a healthy Venus isn't like that. A healthy Venus sticks with something and lives with the consequences of that choice, good or bad. And as we covered in the previous video, a Venus debilitated, an unhealthy Venus consciousness is extremely concentrated on the minutiae of life and the details of daily living. And it's hard for these people to see the bigger picture and simply enjoy any given moment and the beauty of any given moment. And it's hard for them to see something as beautiful if it's flawed, or it's hard for them to appreciate or live and enjoy an experience if they perceive that some kind of detail within that experience has a flaw in it. So a healthy Venus is not going to be so honed in on these small things. So it has much more spaciousness to it, you could say, and that they're able to build, in the physical sense, they're able to create physical surroundings around them that are very comfortable, and they're very able to soothe one. You're able to soothe oneself's surroundings, and that surroundings gradually help you to see and help you to relax and enjoy the finer things in life. And then a healthy Venus is able to mentally create this space of freedom in their minds and create mental freedom, and they're not bound to any particular idea or feeling, like being a slave to ideas and committing yourself fully to one idea. Remember, Pisces is this huge ocean. There's all these infinite possibilities. And so there's a freedom in all of that. And then once you decide on what idea you're going to commit yourself to, you can devote yourself to it. But there's still this ability of being able to feel free in one's own mind and feel comforted in one's own mind, despite what decisions you've made, but better decisions can be made in the future. So a healthy Venus doesn't get entrapped and feel boxed in and compartmentalized by potential choices or new possibilities, or really anything, any kind of idea that they can entertain. They're able to feel content, a deeper sense of content, and that's a great aspect of Venus in general, is that feeling of calmness about what you've chosen to do and content with what's happening around you. So I find that what underlies the healthy Venus is this ability to find balance in material and the spiritual aspects of life. So Pisces as I was talking about, can be such a dreamy place, and a person can be very aloof if they have an unhealthy Pisces, and especially for the moon and Mercury if they're in Pisces. And it can be too soft of a place for other active planets like the Sun and Mars. They're kind of floating along. They're not using their Sun and Mars in more direct ways. But Venus and Pisces, well, they're both, Pisces is a water sign and Venus is the element water. But what helps give Venus the balance is this Rajasic, this focus on the material world. So Venus is able to use the profound and abstract world and even the emotional world that we're all living in of everyday life. And it's able to take those profound and abstract parts of us and connect it to the here and now. And that's not a very easy thing to do at all. So a healthy Venus, it's never getting lost in the occult. It can enjoy the occult. And it's not getting lost in spirituality or lost in the worlds of comfort or overindulgence and the world of relaxation and luxury. It's able to apply abstract concepts into the practical considerations that we have. And that's exactly what you want to do when, say, you're writing poetry, or what happens when you're reading poetry or reading a great work of fiction, or even watching an excellent movie, any excellent, or a play or a story. What's happening when you say, oh, I love that movie or I love that story? What you're doing, or what happens, is that what you're reading or watching, you're applying that into your own life, because the messages, the deeper messages and themes in the story are universal, and you can apply them. And that's what great artwork is in general. You're able to apply these big themes into your own personal experiences. So what a healthy Venus is able to do is create this deep synthesis between profound aspects of life with the everyday aspects of life. And when it comes to art, they're essentially seamlessly weaving in the everyday aspects of life that we can all relate to with deeper, more profound principles that are archetypal experiences of human beings that go beyond the time place that we're living in and the time place that the art is produced in. So we have the classics because they're communicating deep, profound aspects of life, and we may not relate to their everyday life, but we can relate it to our life. So a healthy Venus is able to see these deep, profound things and then apply them to our own practical life. So it's this merging between the practical and the mundane and the practical with deeper spiritual and metaphysical ideas. So a healthy Venus is merging the spiritual world with the material world in a very beautiful way. And that can mean having really profound spiritual experiences and then applying them to your practical everyday life. It doesn't get lost in them. And it's not like Mercury in Pisces, which is very preachy about spirituality but doesn't actually live them out. Or the moon, say, being in Pisces, being a little bit too self-centered and too into one's own self-image. So taking Venus to the next level, or healing an unhealthy Venus, requires connecting what you interact with every day, your practical world around you, with the bigger picture. And it helps to ease the stress of daily living and the constant demands of material life when you're able to bring a bigger perspective into it, get a bigger picture of the deeper meaning within your everyday life. So I like to describe these types of people with a healthy Venus mentality as someone who stops to smell the flowers. So a person who appreciates beauty in everyday things. They're walking down the street, they're thinking about what they have to think about, but then they stop and they see a beautiful bushel of roses, and they're able to stop, take a few minutes and smell the roses and just sit in that beauty for a moment and appreciate that. They're not in a hurry that they're missing the beauty around them. So what that does is it softens our existence, and it's not getting overwhelmed and stressed out by life's problems that what the Venus debilitated problem has. So these people who are working to improve their Venus, it's someone who's choosing, deciding to see the beauty and goodness around them at any given time. And it can be a stressful situation, but making that decision to see the benefits or the positive sides of life, to be able to see the bigger picture, to choose to see those things, and then softening one's existence and being able to feel rejuvenated by that. And so this healthy Venus has this capacity to have a profound experience in a very simple, tiny kind of way. And so it's that merging of the spiritual material, or merging of the profound with the mundane, and doing that on a daily basis. And that what that does is it rejuvenates us, makes life more enjoyable and worth living in general.